The city exhaled a long, cold breath, and the mist that clung to the streetlights seemed to crystallize in the late autumn air. For Leo, this time of night was both an end and a beginning. It was the end of a 10-hour shift, a grueling marathon of kneading dough, sliding trays into the roaring oven, and packing loaves of bread that he himself could barely afford. The scent of yeast and scorched flour was woven into the fabric of his clothes, a permanent perfume that spoke of honest labor and sleepless nights. It was a scent he barely noticed anymore, much like the persistent ache that had made a home in the small of his back. We're so glad you're here. Before we move forward with the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss an uplifting story. We also love our international audience, so please take a second to write your country's name in the comments. He pulled the door of the bakery shut behind him, the small bell above it offering a tired, hollow jingle into the empty street. The lock clicked with a sound of finality. Another night survived. Another small step taken towards a mountain of bills that sat on his small kitchen table. He shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his thin, worn jacket, a garment that had seen too many winters and offered more memory than warmth. His fingers brushed against a crumpled pharmacy receipt, a stark, paper-thin reminder why he pushed his body to its limits. Maya. His sister's face flashed in his mind, her smile as bright and fragile as a flickering candle. The medicine kept that smile from fading, and for that, Leo would have walked through fire. This cold, biting wind was nothing in comparison. His path home was a familiar one, a lonely pilgrimage through the sleeping city. He walked past darkened storefronts, their windows reflecting a ghost-like version of himself, a tall, weary figure moving against the urban emptiness. He chose to walk the 12 blocks to the bus stop, rather than the one closest to the bakery. The extra 15 minutes of walking saved him a transfer fee, a handful of coins that meant the difference between buying fresh milk for Maya's breakfast or settling for water. Every choice in his life was a calculation, a careful balancing act on the tightrope of poverty. Tonight, the wind had a sharper edge than usual. It snaked its way through the collar of his jacket and down his spine, making him shiver. He lowered his head, his breath pluming in front of him in white, fleeting clouds. As he rounded the final corner, the bus stop came into view, a small, glass-paneled shelter illuminated by the sickly orange glow of a single streetlight. It was usually empty at this hour, a silent monument to the city's commuters. But tonight, someone was there. A lone figure was huddled on the bench, a silhouette of misery against the cold, hard glass. As he drew closer, he saw it was a woman. She was hugging herself tightly, her shoulders trembling in a rhythm that was too violent to be just from the cold. He slowed his pace, an instinct of caution flickering within him. The city at night taught you to be wary of strangers, to keep your distance and mind your own business. He had nothing worth stealing, but trouble didn't always ask for a reason. He intended to walk to the far end of the shelter, to put a respectable distance between them, and wait in his own silent world. But then, a particularly vicious gust of wind swept through the shelter, and he saw her flinch. She was wearing a simple dark coat, the kind that was more for style than for substance, completely inadequate for the gnawing cold of a late October night. Her hair, a cascade of dark silk, was damp from the mist, and strands of it were plastered to her pale cheeks. He could see the goosebumps on her hands, the raw, chapped skin around her knuckles. There was no scarf, no gloves. She looked utterly lost, like a bird that had fallen from its nest into a world of ice. His conscience pricked at him. He thought of Maya, and how he would pray for a kind stranger to help her if she were ever in such a state. He looked at his own jacket. It wasn't much, but it had a fleece lining, and it was dry. He could endure the cold for the 20-minute bus ride. His own discomfort felt temporary, manageable. Hers, in that moment, seemed absolute. The internal debate lasted only a few seconds before the quiet compassion that defined him won out. He changed his course, walking slowly toward her so as not to startle her. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She jumped, her head snapping up. Her eyes were wide, a startling shade of deep blue, and they were filled with a mixture of fear and something else, a profound, heartbreaking sadness. For a moment, she looked like she might run. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to scare you. You look freezing. The bus can take a while at this hour." She stared at him, her jaw tight, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "I'm fine," she said, her voice a brittle whisper that the wind nearly snatched away. It was a kind of "I'm fine" that was a shield, a wall built to keep the world out. Leo simply nodded, not wanting to argue or intrude. But he couldn't just stand there and watch her shiver. Without another word, he began to unzip his jacket. It was an automatic, unthinking gesture. He shrugged it off his shoulders, the sudden exposure to the wind making him suck in a sharp breath. He held it out to her. "Hey," he said simply. "Please. You need this more than I do right now." She looked from the jacket to his face, her expression shifting from suspicion to utter disbelief. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She shook her head slightly, a small, almost imperceptible movement of refusal. "I couldn't," she finally managed to say. "I insist," Leo said, his smile tired but genuine. He took a step closer and gently, respectfully, draped the jacket over her trembling shoulders. The garment was large on her, but the effect was immediate. Her shivering lessened almost instantly. She pulled the edges together, her small hands disappearing into the fleece-lined pockets. As she did, she inhaled, and for the first time, she seemed to register the faint, warm scent of baked bread that clung to the fabric. Her eyes, which had been so hard and distant, softened for just a fraction of a second. The warmth of the jacket was more than just physical. It was an act of unexpected kindness in a world that had suddenly turned cold and hostile. She looked up at him, a thousand unspoken questions swimming in the deep blue of her eyes. The silence that stretched between them was thick and heavy, broken only by the whistling of the wind and the distant rumble of an approaching engine. Headlights cut through the darkness, growing from faint pinpricks into two bright, searching eyes. The bus! It slowed with a pneumatic hiss, its brakes groaning in protest against the cold. The doors folded open, spilling a warm, yellow light onto the pavement and inviting them into a world away from the biting wind. For a moment, neither of them moved. Isabella clutched the jacket, the unfamiliar weight of it a comforting anchor in the storm of her emotions. Her mind, usually a sharp, decisive instrument that navigated billion-dollar deals, was a chaotic mess. She should give the jacket back. It was a logical, proper thing to do. This man was a stranger. But the thought of relinquishing the warmth, of returning to the soul-crushing cold, was physically painful. Leo saw the conflict in her eyes. He gave her another small, reassuring smile. "Go on," he urged gently. "You'll miss it." "Your jacket," she started, her voice still thin and reedy. "I can't just—" "Don't worry about it," he interrupted softly. "I don't live far. A little cold won't kill me." It was a lie. Of course. His apartment was a long, cold walk away, but it was a lie offered with the purest of intentions, designed to ease the burden of her accepting his kindness. He gestured toward the open doors of the bus. "Get warm. Get home safe." The bus driver, a large man with a weary expression, cleared his throat impatiently. The sound broke the spell. Isabella looked at Leo one last time, her gaze searching his face for a motive, for the hidden angle she was conditioned to expect. She found nothing but a tired sincerity. She gave a single, sharp nod, a gesture of concession and gratitude, and stepped onto the bus. She fumbled in her coat pocket for a fare card she didn't have before realizing the bus was free at this late hour. She found an empty seat by the window and sank into it, the worn vinyl cool against her back. Through the glass, she watched Leo. He didn't leave. He stood on the sidewalk, his arms crossed over his thin sweater, a solitary figure braving the cold to ensure she was safely on her way. As the bus pulled away from the curb, he gave a final, small wave, then turned and began his long walk into the darkness. Isabella watched until his form was swallowed by the night, a profound sense of disbelief washing over her. The interior of the bus was jarringly bright and mostly empty. A few other souls were scattered throughout, each lost in their own world. A security guard dozing, a cleaner with headphones on, all of them part of the city's nocturnal pulse. Isabella leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, the city light smearing into long trails of color as the bus moved. She pulled the jacket tighter around herself, burying her face in the collar. The scent of bread was stronger now, clean and wholesome. It was a scent of creation, of sustenance. It was so fundamentally different from her own world, which smelled of recycled air expensive leather, and the metallic tang of ambition. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to truly think. The events of the day played back in her mind like a corporate horror film. The boardroom, cold and sterile. The condescending faces of the board members, all men her father had appointed. Their talk of mitigating risks and streamlining assets, which was just sanitized language for firing 200 people from a factory in Ohio. She had fought them. She had argued for the people, for the human cost, and they had looked at her as if she were a naive child playing at being CEO. Her father's final words echoed in her ears. Isabella, you let your emotions cloud your judgment. Business is not about feelings. It's about numbers. She had stormed out, her own words about integrity and responsibility tasting like ash in her mouth. She had driven aimlessly until her car, a finely tuned German machine that cost more than most people's homes, had sputtered to a stop. Dead. Her phone, of course, was also dead. She had been so consumed with rage and frustration that she had forgotten to charge it. Isabella Vance, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, a woman who could move markets with a single phone call, was rendered utterly powerless by a dead battery and an empty gas tank. She had been stranded, alone, and for the first time in her adult life, truly helpless. She shivered again, but this time it wasn't from the cold. It was from the memory of the sheer panic, the terrifying realization of her own vulnerability. She had walked for what felt like miles until she found that bus stop, a tiny island of light in an ocean of indifference. And then he had appeared, her hands, seeking warmth, delved deeper into the jacket's pockets. Her right hand brushed against a small, crinkled piece of paper. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a pharmacy receipt, folded into a tight square. She opened it under the dim overhead light of the bus. The print was small, but the details were starkly clear. The name of the pharmacy, the date from 2 days ago, and then a list of medications. She didn't recognize the names, but the price at the bottom of the slip made her breath catch in her throat. It was an astronomical sum, a sum that would be a rounding error in her company's budget, but for an individual, it was a crushing weight. Below the total, a handwritten note from the pharmacist read, "Partial payment received. Balance due." A name was printed at the top of the receipt, not for the patient, but for the person who had paid, Leo, and beside it, a second name, the patient, Maya. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The man who had given her his only source of warmth, who had lied about living nearby just to make her feel at ease, was carrying a burden she couldn't even fathom. He was fighting a battle for someone named Maya, a battle that was being waged one grueling bakery shift at a time. His act of kindness was not a casual gesture. It was a true sacrifice. He had given her something he desperately needed himself, without asking for anything in return. The bus came to a stop in a more populated, well-lit area of the city. Isabella stood up, her mind clear and sharp for the first time all evening. The fog of her own problems had been burned away by the harsh reality of someone else's. She stepped off the bus, the jacket still wrapped securely around her. She hailed the first taxi she saw, the driver's eyes widening slightly at her disheveled appearance before he saw the determined, commanding look on her face. "Where to, miss?" he asked. She got in, the worn leather of the back seat whirled away from the plush interior of her own car. She looked at the crumpled receipt in her hand, her thumb tracing the name of the pharmacy. The victim who had been shivering at the bus stop was gone. In her place, a CEO had reemerged. But this time, her mission wasn't about numbers or profits. It was about finding a man named Leo. "The head office of Vance Industries," she said, her voice steady and clear. "And please, hurry." The headquarters of Vance Industries was not a building. It was a statement. A blade of glass and steel that sliced the night sky. It was a testament to power, wealth, and relentless ambition. When Isabella walked through the revolving glass doors, the change in atmosphere was instantaneous. The raw, chaotic energy of the city street was replaced by the cathedral-like silence of the marble lobby. The air was cool, still, and smelled faintly of expensive cleaning solutions and success. Arthur, the night security guard who had been with the company since before Isabella was born, was dozing lightly at his monolithic desk. He sat up with a start as she approached, his eyes widening in a mixture of confusion and concern. He had seen Isabella Vance arrive at all hours, always immaculate, stepping out of a black town car with the poise of a queen. He had never seen her arrive in a taxi, disheveled, with dark smudges of exhaustion under her eyes, wearing a man's jacket that looked like it belonged to a labour. "Miss Vance," he stammered, scrambling to his feet. "Is everything all right? Should I call someone?" "Everything is fine, Arthur," she said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil she felt. The familiar mask of command was slipping back into place, but it felt different tonight. Less like armor and more like a tool. "Just working late. Hold all calls to my office." She swept past him without another word, her stride purposeful. The jacket, Leo's jacket, felt strangely out of place in this sterile environment. Its simple, honest warmth was a foreign concept here. In this building, warmth was something generated by a climate control system, precisely regulated and devoid of any human touch. As she rode the private elevator to the penthouse floor, her reflection in the mirrored walls was a study in contrast, a powerful woman encased in the emblem of a poor man's kindness. Her office was exactly as she had left it, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of the city's glittering expanse. Thousands of lights twinkled below, each one representing a home, a life, a story. Before tonight, she had only ever seen it as a landscape, a kingdom to be conquered. Now, she found herself wondering which of those tiny lights belonged to Leo and Maya. She bypassed her enormous mahogany desk and went straight to a secure phone line on a side console. She dialed the number from memory. It rang only once before it was answered. "Yes." The voice was calm, professional, and awake. "Marcus, it's me. I need you in my office. Now." "I'm on my way," he said, without question or hesitation. Marcus Thorne was a head of security, but his role was far more nuanced than the title suggested. He was a fixer, a man who operated in the gray spaces where corporate law and reality didn't quite meet. He was loyal, discreet, and ruthlessly efficient. When he entered the office 10 minutes later, his face was an impassive mask, though she saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "You needed me, Miss Vance." She didn't offer a greeting or an explanation. She walked over to her desk, took the crumpled pharmacy receipt from the jacket pocket, and slid it across the polished wood surface. "I need you to find the man this belongs to," she said. "His first name is Leo. He paid for this prescription for someone named Maya. This is the only information I have." Marcus picked up the receipt, his eyes scanning it with practiced speed. He absorbed the details without a word. "What am I to do when I find him?" he asked. "Nothing," Isabella said firmly. "You will not approach him. You will not speak to him. You will simply find out everything you can, his full name, where he lives, where he works, what his situation is. And Marcus," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a lower, more intense register, "you will do it quietly. This man is not a target. He is to be handled with respect. Is that clear?" The word respect hung in the air between them, an unusual directive in their line of work. Marcus simply gave a curt nod. "Perfectly clear." He pocketed the receipt and turned to leave. He was the best for a reason. He never asked unnecessary questions. As he left, Isabella felt a wave of restlessness. She began to pace the length of her office, the soft rug muffling her footsteps. She was a woman of action, used to solving problems with directives and leveraging capital. But this was different. This was a delicate, human problem, and she felt an unfamiliar sense of impotence. All her wealth and power couldn't undo the hardship in Leo's life. It couldn't cure Maya. While she paced in her glass tower, Leo was finally turning the key in the lock of his own front door. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building where the hallways always smelled of damp and boiled cabbage. He stepped inside, the cold of the apartment wrapping around him like a damp blanket. The landlord was stingy with the heat, and Leo kept the thermostat dialed down to a bare minimum to save on the electric bill. He moved silently through the small living room, his first stop always the same. He cracked open the door to the single bedroom and peeked inside. Maya was asleep, curled into a small ball under a mountain of blankets. A worn teddy bear was tucked under her arm. In the dim light from the hallway, he could see the slight tremor in her breathing. Her latest round of medication always left her weak. He watched her for a long moment, his heart a painful mix of overwhelming love and crushing fear. She was his entire world, the reason for every sacrifice. In the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator. The small light flickered on to reveal a mostly empty space, a carton of eggs, Maya's milk, a stick of butter, and a few wilting vegetables. It was enough for her breakfast and lunch tomorrow, and that was all that mattered. He ignored the gnawing hunger in his own stomach. He was used to it. He sat down at the small, wobbly table, the pile of white and pink envelopes, bills, and overdue notices, mocking him. He ran a hand through his hair, the sheer weight of it all threatening to suffocate him. He was cold, he was hungry, and he was profoundly tired. But as he looked back towards his sister's room, his resolve hardened. He would not break. For her, he would be unbreakable. Back in her penthouse, Isabella had finally stopped pacing. She had taken off Leo's jacket, folding it with uncharacteristic care, and laid it over the back of her $1,000 ergonomic chair. The contrast was almost comical, the simple, faded garment against the sleek, modern symbol of corporate power. The faint scent of bread seemed to fill the room, a humble, grounding presence in a place built on ambition. Her personal phone, a sleek device she used for non-business matters, buzzed on the desk. She snatched it up. It was Marcus. Never a word of complaint. Not once. Just comes in here, week after week, and pays what little he can towards her medicine. The world needs more men like Leo Castillo. Isabella paid for her vitamins, her hand trembling slightly as she took her change. She thanked the woman and walked out of the pharmacy, the bell jingling her departure. The information hit her harder than any negative quarterly report ever had. An orphan, raising his orphan sister, working himself to bone. Her throat felt tight. Giving him money now felt impossibly crude, an insult to the fierce dignity he so clearly possessed. Charity would feel like pity, and a man like Leo deserved respect, not pity. She got back into her car, her mind racing, fitting the pieces together. He needed help, but he would never ask for it. So she couldn't offer it directly. She had to create an opportunity. An intervention that felt like fortune, not a handout. Her gaze fell upon a delivery van parked across the street. Painted on its side were the words, "The Daily Need Bakery, fresh since 1958. An idea, audacious and complex, began to form in her mind. It was a CEO solution, a strategic move designed for maximum impact with minimum collateral damage to pride. She pulled out her phone, scrolling past Marcus's number. She found a different name in her contacts. David Chen, her head of mergers and acquisitions. "David," she said, her voice instantly shifting back to the cool, precise tone of commander. "Cancel your lunch. I have a new project for you, top priority. There's a small, independent bakery called the Daily Need in the Westlake District. I want a full workup. Its financials, its suppliers, its debts, its ownership. Find out who holds the lease on the building. Find every weakness. I want to know if it can be bought." There was a pause on the other end. "A bakery, Ms. Vance." "Yes, David," Isabella said, her eyes fixed on the distant bakery sign. "A bakery. I want you to find a way for me to own it by the end of the week." While the Westlake District slept, the top floor of the Vance Industries building was a hive of focused activity. David Chen and his acquisitions team, a small army of sharp-minded analysts and lawyers, moved with the lethal efficiency of sharks that had scented blood in the water. Fueled by black coffee and the cryptic urgency of Isabella's command, they tore into the financial history of the Daily Need Bakery. To them, it was not a beloved neighborhood institution. It was a target, a collection of assets and liabilities to be analyzed and exploited. By 3 a.m., they had a complete picture, and it was not a pretty one. David Chen presented his findings to Isabella in her office. He projected a series of charts and spreadsheets onto a large screen, the cold, hard numbers telling a story of slow, painful decline. "The owner is a man named Arthur Henderson, 72 years old," David began, his tone crisp and devoid of emotion. "He inherited the business from his father. It's been in his family for nearly 60 years. Unfortunately, sentiment doesn't pay the bills. His leveraged up to his eyeballs. He owes a significant amount to his flour supplier, and a larger commercial distributor has been systematically undercutting his prices for the last 18 months. He has been losing money for 10 straight quarters." David pointed to another document. "Worries. The lease on his building is owned by a commercial real estate firm that has just been acquired by a much larger, more aggressive conglomerate. They have no interest in small tenants. They plan to triple his rent at the end of the month or evict him. By our calculations, Mr. Henderson is less than 30 days from total bankruptcy. Isabella listened, her face impassive. In the past, this was the kind of information that would have sparked a predatory instinct in her. She would have seen it as an opportunity for a lowball offer, a hostile takeover. But now, she saw it differently. She saw a tired old man being crushed by a world that had moved on without him. She saw Leo working through the night in a business that was about to collapse, completely unaware that the floor was about to fall out from under him. "What's our move?" she asked. "Simple," David replied. "We've already opened a line of communication with Henderson's primary creditors. We can buy his debt for pennies on the dollar. We can also make an offer to the real estate firm for the building itself. They are more interested in liquid assets than managing low-rent properties. Once we control his debt and his building, he has no leverage. We can acquire the entire business for a fraction of its potential value." It was a perfect, ruthless corporate strategy. But Isabella had a different goal. "Do it," she said. "Buy the debt, buy the building. But when you make the offer to Mr. Henderson, it will not be a lowball. You will create a new, anonymous LLC to handle the transaction. The offer will clear all of his acquired debts, pay him 20% above the bakery's last official valuation, and include a lifelong pension. I want him to see this as a miracle, not a defeat." David blinked, the directive clearly outside the bounds of a usual aggressive playbook. "A pension? Ms. Vance, that's highly unorthodox." "My orders are perfectly orthodox, David," she said, her voice like ice. "Make him feel like he won. I want his legacy protected, not destroyed." She paused, her thoughts turning to the man at the center of all this. "And David, include a clause in the contract guaranteeing employment for all current staff for a minimum of 1 year, with an immediate 10% salary increase. That part is non-negotiable." While his fate was being decided in a glass tower miles away, Leo was in his own world, a world of warmth, steam, and the rhythmic thump of dough on a flowered wooden table. But even here, the chill of uncertainty had begun to creep in. Mr. Henderson, who was usually a cheerful, bustling presence, had been a ghost all week. Leo saw him in his small, cluttered office, his head in his hands as he stared at stacks of invoices. He heard the strained, desperate phone calls with suppliers, his boss's voice tight with a stress that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "Everything okay, Mr. Henderson?" Leo had asked gently that evening, wiping his flour-dusted hands on his apron. The old man looked up, his eyes weary and bloodshot. He forced a weak smile. "Just the usual headaches. Son, the big guys are making it hard for the little fish to swim." He sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of a lifetime of work. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this old place going, Leo. I truly don't." "That was fast," she said. "Pharmacists in the city are required to keep digital records linked to a patient's primary address for insurance purposes," Marcus's voice explained, calm and factual. It wasn't difficult to cross-reference a prescription number. "The patient is Maya Castillo, age 9. The prescription was paid for by her legal guardian and older brother, Leo Castillo. I have an address in the Westlake district." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Leo Castillo, Maya Castillo. They were real. They had names. The abstract act of kindness now had a face, a family, a home. "Send me the address," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. A moment later, a location pin appeared on her screen. She zoomed in, her finger tracing the streets on the digital map. It was a part of the city she only ever saw from her office window, a dense cluster of low-rise buildings and anonymous streets. She looked from the glowing screen out into the real night, toward that distant, sprawling neighborhood. She had found him, and now, the real question was, what was she going to do about it? Yes, absolutely. Here is Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The first light of dawn had not yet broken when Isabella made her decision. She hadn't slept. Sleep felt like a luxury she hadn't owned. Instead, she had used a private shower in her executive suite, the hot water washing away the grime of the street but not the profound disquiet in her soul. She stood for a long time in front of the full-length mirror, looking at her own reflection with a stranger's eyes. The woman staring back at her was a product of a lifetime of privilege, insulated from the world by a fortress of wealth. Last night, a man with nothing had effortlessly breached those walls with a single act of kindness. She ignored the immaculate row of tailored power suits in her closet. They felt like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. Instead, she pulled on a pair of simple dark jeans and a soft, gray cashmere sweater she had bought on a whim years ago and never worn. The clothes were anonymous, a deliberate shedding of the CEO persona. When her executive assistant, Clara, arrived at the usual time of 7 a.m., she found Isabella not reviewing market reports, but staring out the window, a cup of black coffee in her hand. "Clara," Isabella said, without turning around, "clear my entire schedule for today. All meetings, all calls. Reschedule everything." Clara, a woman who was never surprised by anything, couldn't hide the flicker of shock on her face. "Ms. Vance, the quarterly review of the board is at 10. "They can review it without me," Isabella replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Cite a personal emergency. I will be unreachable." She walked out of the office, leaving a stunned assistant and a day of multi-million-dollar decisions behind her. In the executive garage, she bypassed her chauffeured sedan and got behind the wheel of a nondescript electric car the company kept for errands. The drive from the financial district to the address markers had sent her was like traveling between different countries. The gleaming, architectural marvels of the city center gradually gave way to a landscape of brick and faded paint. The wide, pristine avenues narrowed into streets lined with cars parked bumper to bumper. Hey, the city was not a sterile monument to commerce. It was a living, breathing organism, messy and vibrant and pulsing with the energy of a million lives being lived. She found the address easily. It was a 5-story brick tenement building, its facade etched with the lines of age and endurance. A zigzagging fire escape clung to its front like an iron vine. It wasn't a slum, but it was undeniably a place where life was a struggle, where dreams were often deferred in favor of rent and groceries. She parked across the street, her car looking conspicuously new and clean amongst the older, more battered vehicles. And then she waited. She was a strategist by nature, and this was reconnaissance. She needed to understand the world he inhabited before she could ever hope to interact with it. She watched as the neighborhood woke up. People emerged from the building, heading off to wake. Children with backpacks chatted on their way to school. A sense of community was palpable. Neighbors waved to each other. A man helped an elderly woman with her groceries. It was a world of small, interconnected kindnesses, so different from her own, where every interaction was scheduled and had an agenda. After an hour, the front door of the building opened, and her breath caught. It was him. Leo. In the daylight, he looked younger than she had remembered, but the weariness was still etched into the lines around his eyes. He wasn't alone. He was holding the hand of a small girl who skipped along beside him, Maya. She was bundled in a thick pink coat and a hand-knitted scarf, clearly protected from the morning chill with meticulous care. Her face was pale, but her eyes were bright, and she was looking up at her brother with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. Isabella watched, unseen, as they walked toward a nearby corner. Leo knelt down, his movements unhurried, to retie Maya's shoelace. He listened with a gentle smile as she chatted animatedly about something, his entire focus on this small, precious person. It was a scene of such simple, profound love that it made Isabella's chest ache. This was it. This was a why. This was a reason a man would give his only jacket to a stranger in the cold. Everything he did, every ounce of his energy, was for this little girl. She watched until Maya was safely on a school bus, waving enthusiastically from the window. Leo waved back until the bus turned the corner, his posture slumping slightly once he was out of sight, the full weight of his responsibilities seeming to settle back onto his shoulders. He then turned and walked in the opposite direction, towards a small, commercial street. Once he was gone, Isabella finally got out of the car. Her legs felt unsteady. She had a new destination in mind. A few blocks away, she found the pharmacy from the receipt. It was a small, old-fashioned place with a bell that jingled when she opened the door. An older woman with kind eyes and gray hair pinned in a neat bun stood behind the counter. Isabella browsed the aisles, picking up a bottle of vitamins she didn't need. She approached the counter, placing the bottle down. "Good morning," she said with a polite smile. "Morning, dear," the pharmacist replied warmly. "I'm new to the neighborhood," Isabella began, the lie feeling surprisingly natural. "I was hoping to get involved with some local charities. A friend mentioned a family nearby, the Castillos, I think, with a young girl who's been ill. I was wondering if there was a community fund I could donate to." The pharmacist's expression softened instantly. "Oh, the Castillos. You have a good heart, dear. There's no fund, just them. It's just Leo and his little sister, Maya, since their parents passed in that car accident a few years back." Isabella absorbed the new information, the casual mention of a tragedy that explained everything. "That boy," the woman continued, leaning forward slightly and lowering her voice conspiratorially, "is a saint walking on this earth. Works the night shift at the Daily Need Bakery, and I hear he picks up handyman work during the day. Does it all for that little girl." The word sent a cold spike of fear through Leo's chest. This job, this bakery, was his lifeline. It was the one stable thing in his precarious world. The thought of it disappearing was terrifying. He thought of Maya, of the pharmacy bills, of the empty space in his refrigerator. He pushed the fear down, as he always did, and focused on the work. He kneaded the dough with a little more force, channeling his anxiety into the familiar, repetitive motion that had been his salvation for so long. 2 days later, the miracle arrived. It came in the form of a woman in a sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Henderson had called Leo into his office, and Leo braced himself for the worst. He expected to be told that the bakery was closing, that he was out of a job. Instead, he found his boss sitting behind his desk with a look of stunned, tearful disbelief on his face. "I don't understand it, Leo," Mr. Henderson said, his voice thick with emotion. He held up a thick sheaf of papers. "A lawyer just left. Some new investment company. They want to buy the bakery." Leo felt a confusing mix of relief and anxiety. "Are you going to sell?" "They are not just buying it," Mr. Henderson said, shaking his head in wonder. "They are clearing all my debts. Every penny. They are paying me a fortune. Leo, more than this place has been worth in 20 years. They've even offered me a pension. I can finally retire. I can finally rest." Tears began to stream down the old man's wrinkled cheeks. Leo felt a genuine surge of happiness for his boss, but a cold knot of fear was tightening in his stomach. A new owner, a faceless corporation. They would come in, fire everyone, and turn the place into a soulless chain. What about the staff? Leo asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "What about us?" "That's the most incredible part," Mr. Henderson said, his eyes shining. I told them I wouldn't sell unless my people were taken care of. They said not to worry. The contract guarantees everyone's job for at least a year. And Leo, they're giving everyone a raise." Leo sank into the chair opposite the desk, the news too much to process. It felt impossible, like a dream, saved from the brink, just like that. "They want to meet everyone," Mr. Henderson continued, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. "The new owners. They are sending a representative tomorrow morning before we open, just to introduce themselves and make sure we all feel secure about the transition." Leo nodded, his mind spinning. He should have felt nothing but pure, unadulterated relief. His job was safe. He was getting a raise. It was the answer to his prayers. And yet, he couldn't shake a strange sense of unease. It was all too perfect, too sudden. He was about to meet the anonymous benefactor who had just purchased his entire world, completely unaware that he had already met her on a cold, dark night, and that the first, quiet investment in this entire transaction had been the jacket right off his back. The air in the bakery the next morning was thick with a strange cocktail of hope and anxiety. The small team of employees, who had worked under Mr. Henderson for years, buzzed with nervous energy. They had been saved from the brink, but the future was still a terrifying unknown. Leo moved through a familiar space, the motions of sweeping the floor and wiping down the glass counters providing a small comfort in their routine. He was happy for Mr. Henderson, truly, but a knot of fear was lodged deep in his gut. A faceless corporation, a representative. The words felt cold and clinical. He imagined a man in a stiff suit, a man who saw their beloved bakery not as a place of warmth and community, but as a line item on a spreadsheet. He straightened his apron for the 10th time, glancing at the clock on the wall. 8 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for any minute. The other bakers, a woman named Maria and a young apprentice named Sam, kept peering out the front window. "Do you see anything?" Sam asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Just a delivery truck for the butcher shop," Maria replied, wringing her hands. "What do you think they'll be like, Leo?" "I'm sure it will be fine," Leo said, his voice more confident than he felt. "Mr. Henderson said they were good people." Just then, a sleek black car, so polished it seemed to absorb the morning light, purred to a stop in front of the bakery. It was a kind of vehicle that belonged in a different universe, a silent, imposing vessel from the world of money and power. The team fell silent, gathering in a small, tight knot by the door. This was it. The back door of the car opened, and a woman stepped out. She was not the cold, corporate executive Leo had imagined. She was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her dark hair tied back in a professional, low ponytail. She moved with a quiet, confident grace that was magnetic. As she walked towards the bakery's entrance, the morning sun caught her face, and Leo's heart stopped. His mind reeled, struggling to connect two completely different images. He saw the shivering, desperate woman from the bus stop, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. And then he saw the poised, powerful woman now walking towards him, her expression calm and resolute. It was the same face, the same deep blue eyes, but it was impossible. She pushed open the door, and the small bell above it chimed, the sound impossibly loud in the sudden, deafening silence. Her gaze swept over the small group, professional and warm, before it finally landed on Leo. For a fraction of a second, he saw a flicker of the vulnerability she had shown that night, a brief, unguarded moment of recognition before her composure settled back into place. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you all for meeting me. My name is Isabella Vance. I am the CEO of the firm that has just purchased the Daily Need." The name hit Leo with the force of a physical blow. Vance Industries. The name emblazoned on the tallest, most powerful building in the city skyline. He stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of confusion. The woman he had helped, the woman he had felt a simple human pity for, was one of the wealthiest, most influential people in the country. Isabella spoke to the team for several minutes, her words calm and reassuring. She spoke of honoring the bakery's legacy, of investing in new equipment, of wanting to support them, not replace them. But Leo barely heard her. He was trapped in the surreal space between a cold bus stop and this unbelievable reality. When she finished, she turned her full attention to him. "Mr. Castillo," she said, her tone softening slightly. "May I have a word with you in private?" He nodded numbly and led her to Mr. Henderson's old office. The small room felt even smaller with her in it. He closed the door, and they stood in silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," Leo began, his voice hoarse. I don't understand. You were at the bus stop." Isabella gave him a small, genuine smile. "I was," she confirmed. "Things were complicated that night." She reached into the elegant leather handbag she was carrying. She didn't pull out a business card or a contract. She pulled out his jacket. It was neatly folded, clean, and looked impossibly humble in her hands. She held it out to him. "You left this with me," she said softly. "I believe it's yours." He took it from her, the familiar worn fabric a grounding presence in his spinning world. The faint scent of bread was gone, replaced by a subtle, clean fragrance. "Why?" he whispered, looking from the jacket to her face. All of this, the bakery. Why?" "This isn't charity, Leo," Isabella said, her gaze direct and sincere. "This is an investment. I found your receipt in the pocket. I found out who you were, and I understood what you were dealing with." She took a small step closer. "In my world, every action has a motive, every kindness has a price. But you gave your only source of warmth to a complete stranger on a cold night, expecting nothing in return. A person who can do that is the rarest and most valuable asset I have ever come across. My company invests in things with a future. I'm investing in you." Leo was speechless, the truth of her words washing over him in waves. He looked at the jacket, the simple object that had somehow changed the entire course of his life. "There's one more thing," Isabella continued. "I took the liberty of creating a private medical trust for your sister, Maya. It is fully funded and will cover all of her healthcare expenses for as long as she needs it." Seeing the protest forming on his lips, she quickly added, "Please, don't see it as a gift. See it as an advance, a signing bonus for the new manager of this bakery." The word manager barely registered. The news about Maya's trust was all that mattered. The crushing weight that he had carried on his shoulders every single day for years, the relentless fear and the constant, grinding struggle, finally lifted. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and unstoppable. They were not tears of sadness or even joy, but of a relief so profound it felt like he could breathe for the first time in his life. "Why?" he asked again, the word choked with emotion. Isabella's corporate facade melted away completely, leaving only the woman he had met in the dark. "Because you reminded me what it means to be human," she said. "You showed me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they are willing to give. In a moment of darkness, you offered me warmth. I'm just returning the favor." 6 months later, the sign outside the bakery had changed. It now read, in bright, cheerful letters, "Maya's Need." The inside was renovated, with new ovens and a sparkling new counter, but it still held the same warmth, the same intoxicating smell of fresh bread. Leo stood behind the counter, no longer just a baker, but the proud manager. The lines of exhaustion were gone from his face, replaced by a calm confidence. Maya, healthier and happier than ever, sat at a small corner table after school, diligently doing her homework. Isabella was there too, sitting opposite Maya, not as a CEO in a navy blue dress, but as a friend in a simple sweater, laughing at something the little girl had said. She and Leo caught each other's eye across the bustling room, a silent, shared understanding passing between them. A single, simple act of kindness on a cold night had not just saved a man or a business. It had built a bridge between two different worlds, and in the space between them, it had created something warm, something lasting, something that felt a lot like family. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. This story is a powerful reminder that the greatest changes often begin with the smallest acts of kindness. What part of this story touched your soul the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If this tale brought a little light to your day, please share it with someone who might need it. And to become a part of our storytelling family, don't forget to subscribe. Another beautiful story is waiting for you right here on the screen. Until next time, take care.